Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and one of the most interesting subjects that I love to cover on this channel is canceled LEGO. A lot of times, LEGO will completely come up with a draft of a set, have it be almost ready to be made into production, but for one reason or another, decide not to put it on shelves. And so, for this video, we'll be walking through my top 10 canceled LEGO sets that I think we should have gotten. Now for this list, I am actually going to purposefully exclude some of the canceled LEGO sets that have actually made their way onto shelves because I feel like in that sense, they haven't really been canceled. I mean, they officially are, but if you can obtain them, they're not quite as canceled as a lot of the other sets on this list. Namely, the ones I'm talking about are specifically the Osprey, which you can see right in the back there, the Motorized Technic Osprey, which is a really cool set, but because you can actually get it, I feel like it doesn't really count to be featured on the list. And the same goes for the Overwatch 2 Titan, which also was a canceled LEGO set, but did pop up in certain regions to allow you to get it. Also included on the list of stuff that you could actually get that are officially canceled, you have the Mr. and Mrs. Claus living room, which I also recently got, which I'm not going to include on the list because you can actually get it, as well as stuff like even the canceled Las Vegas architecture skyline, because that was redesigned to be a newer set, but a few copies managed to escape to South Africa of all places. But for this list, we'll be taking a look at some even stranger LEGO items. Items that we could see images of or maybe even just heard about, but never actually got as LEGO sets. Stuff like the massive Ultimate LEGO Movie 2 Batmobile tank. Other sets like the mysterious canceled 2001 set, which they developed a new piece for, but had to cancel it abruptly for no reason. There's a lot of really interesting stuff I want to cover on this list, and so, without further ado, let's jump in to the top 10 canceled LEGO sets that I think we should have gotten. So before we jump right into number 10, I want to just give some honorable mentions that I feel like don't really qualify to be on the list of canceled LEGO sets, but still are interesting enough that they warrant a mention in this video. Stuff like the prototypes for the Vikings longboat set are obviously not really canceled sets because we did eventually get the set, but this one is just very different as a prototype where I felt like it was worth being mentioned, and even certain things like the original idea for LEGO Power Miners being miners versus zombie dinosaurs, which isn't really a canceled set versus an actual fleshed out original theme concept, which was entirely different from what we actually got. It's stuff like this that I feel don't really make sense to include on the canceled sets list because a lot of these are either early ideas or prototypes of sets that we eventually did get, but just stuff that I found interesting, and you can see some images of more of these concepts as we kind of cycle through these particular slides. Now, in particular, a lot of the information on this comes from LEGO designer interviews, Brickset interviews, as well as the Brick Journal magazine, which is a magazine that is actually still ongoing, that has been running for many years, that actually gets a chance to interview LEGO designers and learn about original canceled LEGO items from the vault, which are vintage, original ideas for LEGO themes and sets which just never quite made it to production. Also included in this list are a couple of items from The Secret Life of LEGO Bricks, which is a book that I actually reviewed, which was very exclusive, super hard to get your hands on. You basically had to crowdfund it in order to get a copy of the book, but that also revealed a lot of images and special ideas from the early years, even to the modern era of LEGO, which I'm currently doing an ongoing LEGO history video series on, as well as did a full-on overview of the book itself, which you can check out linked in the description below. And as one final note before we get started, I just want to say that for this list, we are only including things that we actually have images for. Even just one blurry image will suffice, because there are so many canceled rumors about LEGO stuff that we were supposed to get, especially around things like LEGO Dimensions, where we were all but confirmed to get LEGO Shrek, LEGO Minecraft, even Astro Boy, and a ton of obscure LEGO licenses for Dimensions before it was canceled, and those images never saw the light of day. So stuff like that are really interesting to think about and talk about, but since we don't have pictures, I decided not to include those on the list. But without further ado, let's jump right in to number 10. The year was 2012, and LEGO had just launched the Character and Creature Building System, or CCBS for short, in Hero Factory, and LEGO decided to also launch it for action figures alongside the Marvel and DC superhero brands. Suffice to say that these were pretty divisive sets, especially by today's standards. Far from the much more refined and polished versions of the CCBS action figures we would eventually get for LEGO Star Wars in 2015 and onwards, these were very clunky, basic action figures that didn't really look like the characters that much, but served their purpose as buildable action figures and was an important step in the evolution of the character and creature building system. Now,
probably very obviously, these did not sell very well, but had they sold well, LEGO was actually planning on releasing a brand new wave in 2013. One of which was Aquaman, which was one of the character design concepts for 2013, which was conceptualized as a set but never really made it past the drawing board, and the other one, which is a little bit more interesting, was going to be a movie tie-in for the Man of Steel movie that came out in 2013 for Superman himself. Would this have meant that for future movie tie-ins, we could have gotten action figures along the CCBS vein if these were successful? I guess we'll never know, but this is something that I honestly haven't seen discussed that much that really interested me as a Bionicle and CCBS action figure fan, that we almost got a buildable action figure Superman from LEGO all the way back in 2013. Moving onwards to number 9, we have an example of something that was actually initially released as a wave of LEGO sets, but performed so poorly that any future sets were just cancelled right off the bat. And that is LEGO Project Genesis. So what was Project Genesis? Well, first of all, I did a full-on documentary video for LEGO History, going throughout the history and conceptualization of this entire brand new initiative for LEGO at the time in the early 2000s, which was kind of a deep dive into the entire history of this particular project. So if you're interested in learning more, you can check out that documentary linked in the description below. But to keep it short, Project Genesis was a brand new style of action figure building theme, which, kind of continuing along the theme of number 10, was a design meant to be able to create an entirely new building system for LEGO. Based entirely upon ratchet joints, Project Genesis, as the name implies, allowed builders to essentially play God and create their own humans, ecosystems, aliens, characters, animals, you name it. It was kind of CCBS before CCBS was a thing. Now, Project Genesis's first project was Galador, and for folks who are in the know about LEGO history, you all probably know what happened with that one, and there's a reason why we don't see many projects like this come out of LEGO nowadays, because it just simply did not sell well at all. But imagine a world where LEGO's focus was actually pivoting towards action figures instead of the brick. This was a really interesting piece of history to uncover from the Secret Life of LEGO Bricks book, where the only known image we actually have of set concepts from Project Genesis, other than what remained of Galador, are these two images right here, where you can see a bug-like alien creature connected via segmented torsos, which seems a little bit similar to something we would have gotten for Galador, as well as a more mannequin plain style humanoid, which is really interesting to serve as a template for a ton of future sets. Of course, I for one am very happy that LEGO decided to focus entirely on the brick. I love some action figure stuff, but this is a little bit out there even for me, although it would have been really cool to see LEGO pursue this idea even more, and who knows, if Galador was successful, Project Genesis may be what LEGO sets would look like today.
But as we move on to number 8, we come across a set that is not only the most recent item on this list, but also one of the most complete sets. And by that I mean, set number 77014, the Temple of Doom, was essentially ready to go. Images were made of the boxes, the sets were presumably in production, details had been sent over to retailers, but last minute LEGO decided not to release the set for whatever reason. They never really gave a full explanation. They basically just said something around optimizing the product lineup, so no real information was ever given with LEGO, but there are a few reasons as to why this set probably was cancelled. First of all, it depicts Kali, which is a real-world Hindu deity, which is probably an issue because not only is it actually depicting an actual religious figure, which LEGO has done on very rare occasions in the past, namely with the Lunar New Year sets, but specifically it depicts it in a villainous light, where much like in the film it could have been considered as cultural appropriation. What likely happened is that somehow late in the game of actually designing the set, getting it along to production, and planning it for release, LEGO decided that this wasn't necessarily the kind of set they wanted to release in 2023, and just decided to can it, which is a shame because I know that the community is pretty split on this, but more people than not actually did want this set to be released. It looks like it would have been a lot of fun with the roller coaster pieces being used as a minecart chase, all new minifigures as well. Pretty much every single figure included in this set would have been exclusive, which would have been so special to get these characters depicted in 2023. And what's really interesting is that in 2009, we actually got a Temple of Doom set number 7199, but of course times have changed, and nowadays LEGO has clearly decided that this isn't really an appropriate set to release in 2023. Unfortunately, this is probably the last we'll ever see of the set, unlike a lot of other sets that were cancelled last minute like the Osprey or even the Overwatch 2 set, where a couple of copies did make it onto the secondhand market. This one unfortunately seems that it was stopped well before it actually made its way to retailers, which means that you probably will never be able to get a copy of this set ever. Which is too bad, because I think it is a really cool and interesting set, would have been a lot of fun to play with, although the reasons behind its cancellation, although never confirmed, are pretty understandable. Going onwards to number 7, we have another recent entry on this list that is less of a cancelled set and more of a proposed idea that never really made it past the ideation phase, but that is the System brick-built LEGO Bionicle Takanuva GWP. So what's the story behind this? Well, earlier this year, LEGO released a Tahu and Takua Bionicle-themed gift with purchase in January of 2023 to commemorate the Bionicle theme for the 90 years of LEGO. It was a really cool tribute to fans of Bionicle and fans of the company's history, featuring a couple of specialized printed elements for the faces and all sorts of really great designs. I was a big fan of LEGO doing this as a special tribute set, and actually as part of the LEGO Ambassador Network, I got a chance to interview the designers behind the set, where they mentioned that there were a couple of alternate concepts proposed, one of which was this brick-built system-scale Takanuva, which was presented to LEGO, who eventually chose the Tahu and Takua instead. Now, this is a pretty divisive model. Some people love it, some people really don't love it, and I'm actually in the camp of someone who actually really does like it. To me, this represents an actual LEGO action figure brick built out of standard LEGO system bricks, which is really cool because obviously LEGO isn't going to be bringing back any Bionicle pieces, and this feels the closest that we could get. It blends system and Technic really well, it has full articulation in the knees, the elbows, ball joint attachments for the upper arms and the upper legs, and overall it's just a really cool design, mimicking Takanuva, the 7th Toa, which was originally released in 2003 as one of the main characters of the Bionicle storyline. The GWP was essentially going to be very similar in style to the Tahu and Takua set, something like this, but probably a little bit more refined, and while I am really happy that we got what we eventually got, this would have been a really cool model to build and actually have in hand, which is why I actually ordered all the pieces to build it myself, and will be reviewing it on the channel at some point in the future. Moving onwards to number 6, we have a look at a theme from LEGO's Vault, a classic proposed vintage LEGO sub-theme of Castle, which went all the way to receive a ton of set prototypes, special minifigures, and even some new molds considered for it, but never actually made it into production, and that is LEGO Europa. So what exactly was this supposed to be? Well, the idea was that this was supposed to be an 18th century version of Europe, with cannon forts, towns, bridges, and even transportation, and LEGO was considering a lot of different items for the sub-theme of Castle, and they even actually considered bridge trolls and witches and Dracula, kind of going in a more fantastical element, which isn't really something that we saw from sub-themes of LEGO Castle even until like 2008 was really when we got into the fantasy era. And alternatively, LEGO also considered historically correct soldiers of like Scotch, Russian, and Dutch armies with ships and even hot air balloons, and even integrating the colonial era. So all these ideas were swirling around LEGO designers' heads as they were putting this together, but for whatever reason they decided not to go forwards with this theme. If I had to imagine, they probably figured that a civilian-focused LEGO Castle sub-theme would not have been as popular as, say, some of the more battle-focused ones with knights and castles. But I personally think that this would have been really, really cool because we have not gotten a lot of civilian LEGO Castle sub-themes at all. We got a couple with the medieval market village and whatnot, but really, if you think about it, we haven't gotten that many dedicated sub-themes focused on mostly just civilian castles and civilian buildings, with a focus away from the fortresses and more on just regular, normal minifigure life, which I think would have been really interesting to see. Overall, it is a big shame to me that this theme was not actually ever made into production. I love getting civilian stuff for LEGO Castles, so it would have been cool to see an entire theme for it, and seeing some of these concepts are really interesting. We've gotten a lot of LEGO animals over the years, but one animal that we have never gotten is the Loch Ness Monster, which is actually something they were considering that kind of looks like a cross between the crocodile piece, a snake piece, and the dragon piece, which I just think is so interesting, and it's really cool to see some of the design remnants of stuff like the Loch Ness Monster be introduced years later in 2003's Orient Expedition with their golden dragon. It's just so cool seeing LEGO just use old prototypes and continue to expand upon their building system. But overall, LEGO Europa just never happened. We never got a civilian-focused LEGO Castle line until
I guess next year there are rumors swirling that we're getting a civilian-focused LEGO Market set for Castle, so that would be super cool, but as of right now, LEGO Europa is still in the vault. As we move onwards to number 5, you may be noticing a bit of a theme. There is a bit of a construction focus in this particular video, which was entirely unintentional. Again, these are the top 10 cancelled LEGO sets that personally just really interest me. I got into LEGO because of Bionicle and large action figures with LEGO, so I guess it makes sense that a lot of the items on this list are actually construction plus action figure related. And one of those major ones is LEGO Galador. So LEGO Galador was the ill-fated theme as part of Project Genesis in 2002, which saw a first wave release of sets to coincide with its TV show, but since it did so poorly, LEGO decided to basically just cancel any future sets that would have come out for Galador. And there were a lot planned. Now, out of all of the prototypes and cancelled models on this list, the ones that we're about to see are probably some of the ones that have been documented the most clearly out of any LEGO prototype in existence. The reason behind this is because normally LEGO is pretty tight about their prototypes. They don't really tend to enjoy showing stuff off, especially if they can use it for a future type of set or theme, and really if there are cancelled LEGO sets, unless it's something that's so out there and strange and specific that LEGO just decided that whatever, we're just going to go ahead and release it, we will never really get any clear images of LEGO prototypes. However, these are so different than what LEGO is doing today that I can imagine they just figured, you know what, whatever, we're never going to touch these again, might as well allow the images and videos to be released. And so Nick Voss, aka Prince Galador on Twitter, who actually is a current employee of LEGO, literally went to LEGO's vault and found these prototypes and asked their permission to post them on Twitter. LEGO decided that, unlike most prototypes, these ones probably will never see the light of day again, so they said, you know what? It doesn't matter, let's take a look. So for this point, I've included a series of unique prototypes, but only one of them is probably the one that really interests me the most. First off, we have Euripides on Earth. This is a really interesting model because it was meant to actually include specialized breathing tubes and a liquid indicator in the back of the model. It was going to be one of the only LEGO sets to actually include a liquid canister included as part of the set itself. So you can see there's tubes on the back that actually showcase liquid and bubbles being floating around in there. Really interesting for a toy prototype, and it was supposed to depict Euripides wearing a special breathing suit to exist on Earth. The next one was Keknik. I believe the story behind this was that the villain Gorm was converting the Nick main character into an agent of his own devices, so it's kind of an evil, Gormified version of Nick. You can see so many details in the head sculpts and everything where this was pretty much ready to go. We have a couple of bogies, which were actually seen in the show itself, which were Gorm's swarms of evil bugs, which we saw the head of in the creature building set, but we never actually saw any of these other parts like the stinger tail and the claw, or the wings, which definitely look really interesting and I'm sure could be useful for some mocks here and there. But the one that interests me the most is the Makar. So what exactly is this? Well, this is a shark-themed motorcycle. What is not to like about this? I mean, this is a really wild, wacky, and out there concept. There are actually so many images of this and even a couple of prototypes that actually slipped out and are in the existence of hardcore Galador collectors. You can see that there were movie props created for it for the TV show. You can even see a prototype for the Mokar itself, which is completely different than the finished set. But yeah, the really weird story behind this is that one randomly appeared on Bricklink for only like a couple $100 a few years ago. Oh my goodness, I wish I would just noticed this appear because I would have paid so much money to get my hands on this one-of-a-kind prototype for LEGO. I mean, this is worth thousands upon thousands of dollars nowadays if anyone is even willing to sell it. But yeah, to exist in the world, it is a shark-themed motorcycle. It's very out there compared to other LEGO sets, but what's not to like about a shark-themed motorbike? I really wish that this set got released because I honestly feel like this could have been the most popular Galador set if it actually came out. Of course, we will never know because Galador was quickly shelved after its failure in 2002, and then we can move on to number 4. So for number 4, we have one of the most well-known cancelled LEGO themes, and this was originally revealed in Brick Journal years ago, because back in the 1980s, LEGO did consider and design a ton of sets for a 1920s era gangster theme, which is one of the most interesting concepts for a LEGO theme ever, and one of the things that I can probably say that we've really never seen from LEGO since its original concept image was released. So for obvious reasons, this was never released. Not only would this have had to rely on mostly adult fans of LEGO who didn't really exist back in the 1980s, I mean there were some of them, but it wasn't nearly as big as it is today, but also due to the somewhat adult subject matter of actual gangsters, LEGO decided, probably wisely, not to release this as a sub-theme. But oh my goodness, look at those builds. I think it would have been so cool to actually get a gangsters-oriented sub-theme from LEGO because this isn't really something that we've ever seen before. I love the way the vehicles are built, utilizing the Fabuland car chassis, but actually putting a vintage American style of spin on it, and it's really interesting seeing the American architecture being used here, from the bank to the diner to the Ritz Hotel. All sorts of buildings that we never really saw from LEGO, especially in the 1980s. I'm a big fan of the way that this entire presentation is laid out. You've got boats, you have, of course, very fancy hats for the gangsters themselves, and while I definitely see that LEGO probably would never have released this theme, especially given their policy on violence and actual real-world depictions of violence, it still is really cool to imagine a scenario where what if LEGO actually released a gangsters theme in the 1980s, and how popular would those sets have been on Bricklink nowadays? Moving on to number 3, we have what I promise is the final Construction entry on this list. What can I say? These are just so interesting to me. But back in 2018, sales of the LEGO Star Wars Construction figures were really declining. A lot of the most recent wave sets like Han Solo and Darth Maul were really not selling well at all. And because of this, LEGO decided to essentially just cancel all of the future CCBS Construction theme sets that we were supposed to get. Which is a shame because I feel like the two on this list would probably have been some of the most popular ones they ever made. However, thanks to a leaked retailer's catalog, we actually have images of these, showcasing that LEGO had these far enough along production that they sent information to retailers, which is a big shame because I think these two sets are really cool and I really wish we actually got them. The first one is a Super Battle Droid set, which is pretty interesting. I think this one feels more like a standard Construction figure. You have some actual system builds used for the lower arms there, which is quite strange to see in a Construction-based set. The fingers themselves are utilizing system-based pieces, as well as the stud shooters mounted on the arm itself, but overall it looks pretty interesting. I'm very curious to see how that top part would have worked, and overall, droid-based characters or characters who are not standard humans tended to sell a lot better for this particular style of toys, so I really do feel like this would have been popular for the Battle of Geonosis. The second set, though, is this one, and this is a huge missed opportunity from LEGO because, kind of ahead of its time in 2018, we almost got a 501st Trooper focus set on an ATRT for the Clone Wars TV show, The Battle of Umbara, which is one of my favorite arcs, and this build is phenomenal. It is basically taking the concept of the Scout Trooper and Speeder Bike by using Technic to recreate a large-scale vehicle for a CCBS figure to ride, and translating it into a full-on movable and posable ATRT built pretty much entirely out of Technic pieces. This is a really cool build. I really wish that we actually got this, and I just wish we got more images of it because I kind of want to recreate this myself. But because they did not sell well, LEGO decided to cancel these two sets, which could have been the best Star Wars CCBS sets we could have gotten. But alas, that is all there is, and now we can move on to number 2. At number 2, we have an oldie but a goodie. It is probably the single most well-known cancelled LEGO theme prototype images that have ever been released, and that is Seatron. And there is one set in particular that really interested me about Seatron itself. So what's the deal behind Seatron? Well, Seatron was essentially going to be a sub-theme of Classic Space, and if you think that sounds familiar, we actually did get something very similar to it with the Aqua Zone line later on in the 1980s, and as well as Aqua Raiders and going forwards. But Seatron was developed really early in the development of LEGO Space. The setting was going to be an alien planet with underwater astronauts, and they essentially were planning to make this entire theme built around a monorail. And that is really the most interesting piece to it. The monorail for Seatron was intended to be this very vibrant yellow and transparent blue colored monorail, which is the exact same color scheme as Aqua Zone itself, as well as all sorts of different colors for the bases with like white and trans red, a very unique color scheme to integrate into a theme like this, and they initially were trying to create a ton of new monorail pieces specifically for the theme. From a yellow motor to different colors of the stanchions, this was going to be an all-out expansion of the monorail system. But unfortunately,
I think this was a little bit ahead of its time because the Futron monorail, which was basically the very first one that they made, just simply didn't really sell well at all. I guess the price was just too expensive for kids to be able to get. Parents figured that it was a really expensive set to buy for their kids, especially as one working Lego monorail, and so because the Futron monorail didn't sell well, they essentially decided to shelve the entire theme because the theme was really built around one gigantic flagship set, which was meant to be this underwater monorail. Still, it is so interesting to see all sorts of different concepts developed for Seatron. It is really strange because they actually were planning on making a modification to the minifigure itself, including an alien minifigure for the first time in LEGO history with specialized molded torsos and legs and even a molded head, which went as far into development that some people actually do own this minifigure as a prototype, both in standard green and transparent green, but LEGO decided that they didn't really want to deviate too far from the standard minifigure template, and so they just also decided not to release this. Seatron would have seen an entire faction of sea people who were the residents of this underwater planet, where you can see a lot of influence that would eventually be integrated into stuff like Aquazone and even some panels that they would use in the UFO subtheme, but they also were trying to introduce all sorts of new animals, from a hammerhead shark that is more of an alien type of look and feel for it, to the color scheme being black, green, and trans neon green, which essentially was the color scheme to the Aqua Raiders lineup in 1997, so it's really interesting seeing LEGO continue to refine and evolve their ideas for a sub-theme like this many years down the line. Still, it's very cool to imagine what could have been. I really wish we got that amazing Seatron monorail. I'm a big fan of the LEGO monorail sets. I own all the monorails and I have them proudly on display. They are some of my favorite LEGO sets ever, and when I saw that we initially were going to get an underwater monorail but didn't, I was really bummed because this would have just been so cool. Alas, it was not meant to be. The only monorails we got were the Futron, Unitron, and Airport Shuttle monorails. And now we can move on to number one, the number one most anticipated cancelled set that was the most exciting to me. And this one is quite an interesting one. So back in 2019, LEGO had just released the LEGO Movie 2, and unlike many of the previous LEGO movies, this did not get a behind-the-scenes book. Usually, for the LEGO Batman movie and the LEGO Ninjago movie, we got a behind-the-scenes book to take a look at the concept artwork and prototypes for sets that really had a deep dive into what you can actually find in the development of the movie. But for whatever reason, because they didn't sell that well, they didn't make one for the LEGO Movie 2, and as such, the only little bit of development concepts that we got released for the LEGO Movie 2 were actually shown off at the LEGO house in Billund, Denmark, where they had a special exhibit showcasing prototypes, cancelled set concepts, and even minifigure designs for the LEGO Movie 2. Out of all of these, most of them were made into actual sets, aside from just a couple of unique outliers, but there were two vehicles that were initially supposed to be made into official LEGO sets, but never actually hit store shelves. The first one was Chainsaw Dave's Battle Vehicle, which is a really cool looking gigantic chainsaw, but that is not the focus of this number one pick. No, instead, the focus is on this absolute monstrosity here. It is Batman's Battle Vehicle. It is basically one of the largest Batman themed builds that we ever would have gotten. It feels like a cross between a massive Power Miners driller as well as a Batman type vehicle itself. One of my favorite details is you can see the original kind of classic vintage style of Adam West Batman mounted on the top of this, and just seeing how large the rest of it is. This is one of the most unique looking vehicles I've ever seen from LEGO, and it does not look like a set. This looks like a crazy mock, and this was initially supposed to be a set. They had it all ready to go. This was basically the finalized version of the set. As you can see, they had decals or even some references to other LEGO themes on the side, like there's a LEGO Atlantis logo reference or Aqua Raiders. There's just all sorts of fun details on this. The drill, of course, would have spun like crazy. But in the 11th hour, they decided to cut it from the movie, and this particularly disappointed designer Mark Stafford, who works for months and months. I believe he spent almost a year trying to refine this, only for Warner Brothers to decide not to feature it in the movie after all, and as such, it was essentially just cut and cancelled as a LEGO set. It is very unlikely that we will ever see something like this again, so all the development work that went into this is essentially just wasted, which is a big shame because this just looks so cool. I can only imagine how cool it would be to drive this around, to roll it along the floor, and actually have the drill spin in all sorts of different segments. This would have been one of the coolest sets to come out of the LEGO Movie 2, and I'm honestly just so disappointed we didn't actually get this as a set, because I feel like they could have just thrown it into the Apocalypseburg segment in the movie and it would have fit in totally fine. But for whatever reason, they decided to cut it, so this will probably never again see the light of day as a LEGO set. And so that about sums up this list. However, there are so many more. This barely scratches the surface of all the canceled LEGO material that is out there. I've done a lot of in-depth videos on the canceled LEGO stuff that we've seen in the past that really do a deep dive into the details and the minifigures and the builds of pretty much every single canceled LEGO thing, but there's still always so much more to cover, so if you want to see me cover more, let me know down in the comments if you want to see another top 10 video. If this as well, we might do a few more, so we'll have to wait and see, but thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this look at my personal top 10 canceled LEGO sets that I wish we would have gotten. Okay, maybe not Project Genesis, but the rest of them, I do wish we would have gotten the rest. Alright, and with that, we have summed up our look at the top 10 canceled LEGO sets I think we should have gotten. Let me know down in the comments below if you were surprised by any sets on this list. Were there any that you personally didn't know about? I certainly had a lot of fun doing the research for this and putting together a list of some of the most interesting canceled LEGO items. Now, there's a lot more than 10 canceled LEGO sets, so maybe if this is popular enough and if people want to see more stuff like this, I might do another top 10 canceled sets we should have gotten. Let me know in the comments if you want to see something like that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for tuning into Duckbricks. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon, and bye for now.